Good morning and welcome to this demo. I'm going to be showing you a demo with oil paint this time. And before I'm going to explain to you why and what we're going to do, I just want to quickly explain to you what we're going to do, what I'm going to do in this demo. So I'm going to be painting a face in black and white oil paint. And I'm going to start out with sketching the basic outlines, the basic features of the face by measuring with the back of my pencil. Did I say pencil? I meant brush, I'm sorry. And like I said, this demo is going to be in black and white. And you might think an oil painting demo, what is this? It's been a really long time since I've done one. I think it was, let's face it, I don't even know which year it was. It was a couple of years ago. And ever since, I kind of dropped the oil paints. I don't know why. I may talk about that a little bit later on in the demo. And I really wanted to get back into it. And one of the ways for me to get back into a material that I'm not entirely comfortable with is by starting out with black and white. So that's the reason we're doing this monochrome painting today. If you're going to join me, you're going to paint along with me, and you don't feel like doing black and white, or it's just not your thing, you can just choose another color. You can choose any color and white. You've seen me do it in previous projects. You can do monochrome with any color you want, all right? So if that makes you happier, then please go ahead. I'm using water-soluble oils for no other reason than I have them. I just have them on hand. And I do find them convenient in a sense that, at the end of the day, you can wash your brushes with water and soap. And yeah, you can also make your paint a little less stiff by adding just a little bit of water. So, water-soluble oil paint in lamp black and titanium white. That's it. In terms of brushes, I don't really have any specific oil paint brushes. I just have a couple of brushes that I also use for acrylics that are a little bit worn down. I usually buy these sets from my art supplier, the ones where you get all the sizes in one tube that are pretty affordable. So I don't own any expensive oil paint brushes, and I don't intend on buying them anytime soon. So I think that's it. Oh yeah, and of course I am painting on, it's kind of important, I am painting on oil paint paper. Right, it's just my art supplier's in-house brand, oil paint paper. If you buy paper specifically for oil paint, you're going to get less oil leaking out the back. Right, so this paper is specially prepared to be able to handle oil paint. I didn't put on any gesso, I just paint straight on the paper. So those are the materials that I'm going to be using. I'm going to do this demo a little bit. I'm not really sure what the point of it. I don't want to turn this into a lesson, and I don't want to pretend like I'm going to teach you anything about oil paints, because I'm not. I have very little experience with oil paints. I did a couple of projects when I had enough confidence for some reason to suddenly try that, but I am in no way experienced with working with oil paints. So this for me is more of an exploration than it is an actual planned lesson. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that works for you in some way, where you can see me struggling, basically, because I'm going to struggle. I know that now, and that's fine. And I, in some way, would like to think that that could help somebody understand that even for those of us who paint a lot, maybe even full time, maybe even in a certain professional capacity, trying out new things is really just as frustrating. It's not any easier. And we're just going to see what happens. And we're going to see what we run into. And maybe even, how it compares to my previous works, my previous projects in acrylics and other dry medium that I sometimes use. So we're just going to run with it. And I laid out right now, I have my basic features laid out. Right, I tend to use the same method when I draw faces, when I sketch faces before I start painting. I do prefer to measure to some point. And then we just start with the basic shapes of any face. So I didn't fill my palette because I figured it might be a little bit boring to watch me mix black and white. I think most of you know how to do that. But this shade it's a dark gray. It's a little bit darker than a medium gray that I'm going to use to put in some of the darker areas. And my idea is that I'm going to make them darker and leave some room to lighten up certain areas. We're just going to see how that goes. So my experience mostly when it comes to painting is with acrylics. And before that, before I started working with acrylics, I only work with dry medium. So pencil, I had pastel pencils that I'm very, very fond of. And that's just an entirely different way of painting. I also did a lot of watercolor. Used a lot of black watercolor, which is a lot of fun. And I did some oil paint projects, experiments, whatever you want to call it, when I started out painting. And the reason why I started with oil paint in the first place may sound a little bit strange, but it's because I didn't really know any other kind of paint. My grandmother was a painter and my grandfather as well, and they used exclusively oil paints because there were no acrylic paints when they started out painting. So I only knew oil paint. So I initially started with that and worked my way through it. And then I started doing actual courses and got into the art community on Facebook and started working with acrylics. And I can remember when I started with acrylics, I was like, what is this? How does one work with this? It was so frustrating because it dries the minute you put it on. And I think that same kind of frustration is what we feel whenever we start with a new material that is quite different from what we're used to. All right, so if you are experienced in acrylics, and I think when you then move on or move over to oil paints, you're going to feel that same kind of frustration because it does not behave the same way at all. And I think maybe that is something that we want to explore during this demo, right? That feeling of what it feels like again to sort of start over almost, and having to feel that that uncomfortable feeling that it's not behaving the way that you expect it to behave, the way you want it to behave. And basically trying to understand this new material. And I'm just procrastinating right now. I'm just trying to not start my actual painting process by sketching a little bit more. But I think it's time that we put in some actual oil paint. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And again, I'm choosing my mid gray almost. And I don't really have a plan. And I was thinking as I was editing this video, I was thinking, hey, maybe it would have been a good idea if you had some kind of plan. But then again, yeah, me and plans. I mean, if you know me, then you know that is a great idea, but it never really works. So we're just gonna go ahead and put in paint. I tend to add, like I said before, a tiny bit of water because my paint is quite stiff coming from the tube. So I add a little bit of water for those first layers, especially because it soaks in a little bit in the paper, so it becomes a little bit difficult to handle. My experience with water-soluble oils is that you can't just add unlimited amounts of water. It's gonna turn very grainy and very nasty, and it's not gonna look great. Right, so I only use it to loosen up the paint just a tiny bit, and but not to sort of liquefy my paint. Don't do that. There are water-soluble, how do you call those? Thinners, if that is what you want. You can Google those. There are a lot of those available that you can add to your paint, but right now I am working without any kind of medium, without any kind of thinner, anything like that, just paint. All right. And this is also something I try to do when I work with a new material. I try to avoid all the different mediums and additions and this and that, because when you Google it, when you start looking up information about how to work with oil paints, it feels like you need half a laboratory to work with this stuff. They got solvents for this and thinners for that, and then it has to be in a certain order, and you have 25 different kind of oils. I didn't even know there were so many oils. I did not. Right, so it gets really overwhelming really quickly. So I would like to avoid that because that's not good for my mood at all. So just paint here. And I'm going to try and put in those a little bit of a lighter mid-tone. And see what happens when you touch with the other parts that have paint on it. Because that's kind of the point of oil paint, right? I understand that there is a depth of color and etc., but the whole point of oil paint for me is that when you touch an area that has paint on it, it's going to blend. And that is something that acrylic doesn't do because it dries. And it's a really great thing. I mean, it's it's kind of magical how that works on your surface, and at the same time it can be very fiddly because you have stuff on and then you touch it and it moves again. And I think that movement of paint, that behavior is kind of what I want to explore in this demo, to get a certain to get a sense of it so that it doesn't freak me out every time it happens. So like I said before, I did one very short lesson in, again, I think it was Let's Face It. I'm gonna look that up. A couple of years ago, which was also in black and white. And a lot of you, were like, can you maybe do that more often? And I really tried to sort of gain more confidence enough to do a lesson on it. And it's not always as easy as, okay, I got something, it works, and then I'm gonna do lessons on it. And it's been, last year, the previous year, it's been a bit of a difficult year for me in terms of mood, but also self-confidence, that I'm just not entirely sure what the point of all my classes are and what the point of me as a teacher is. So switching to a material that I'm not entirely comfortable with and also has a long-standing history in the history of art was just, it felt very daunting to me and not something that inspired me to do anything productive. I tried and I had everything set up and I just completely blocked myself from doing anything. And as I'm starting to feel a little bit better, and whenever you start feeling better, you don't know this when you feel bad at a certain point in your life. People tell you, when you come out of it, you're probably gonna have like new insight, new ideas, and you're just like, okay, whatever. I just feel like crap right now, so go away. But it is true that when you start feeling better, you start seeing things more clearly. And I think one of the things that I started seeing more clearly is that I don't necessarily want to teach you how to work with any stuff in a technical way. I mean, there are so many people out there who have been to school, who have done years and years of research, or have like 30 years of experience with all sorts of things. People who can teach you how you need to technically master a certain material or a certain way of painting, and that person is not me. And it started to become more clear to me, at least, that I'm not really in this to necessarily be a teacher. I know that's what people call you, but it's not really what I call myself. I really just I want to experience this thing called art and what it does to you and what it does to your life. And I want to share that. And I want to see if people can relate, or if they don't, if they have different insights into whatever it is we're doing. And that's kind of what I want. And then it took me a couple more weeks, honestly, to just set up my camera and be like, all right, we're just gonna paint something, and we're just gonna sort of document the process and what happens, and whatever happens happens, right? So that's how I came to do this demo, as sort of I want to get back into my natural way of painting. And my natural way of painting is to try stuff out without worrying about it like I have to change the world or something. I remember there was a time when I would just slap on paint and be like, hang on, it's paint, it's available in the art store, so I'm pretty sure it's not limited to having a PhD in something, so why not just slap it on somewhere? And like I said, there are people who can do incredible things with oil paint, but they can do incredible things with just about anything. So I'm not trying to minimize the amount of work it takes to become technically proficient in painting. But I feel like most of us in the art community are in it to add something to our life, a sense of creativity, sense of wonder, just trying something else that doesn't involve a phone or a screen or whatever. And also, yeah, to better yourself, of course. But there are a lot of different ways that you can become better at something. And I think it especially with art, it's just really important that you find a way that works for you. And if that way is non-technical, if that way is not about necessarily understanding all the technical aspects of something, if that way involves experimenting and learning by trial and error, then I feel maybe that is something you should explore. So that's a whole lot of talking for a painting demo. I'm just going to assume that you know me by now, and I just talk and talk and talk. And then every now and then I explain what it is I'm doing on the canvas, on my paper. I'm just trying to see if I can lay down a little bit of detail here and see how that works. It's a bit fiddly. I do have smaller brushes, but I don't want to go there yet, I think. The thing with oil paint and what really strikes me is that you cannot just lay over a new color and be done with it, a new value, the way you do with acrylics. It immediately blends in, and I feel like the risk is that you end up with something that is very blended and something that is very low in contrast. Right, because you put in white in these gray areas and it just mixes with the gray that is on. So we're going to see how we're going to work with that. The fabulous thing, however, is that you can sculpt your paint while it's on. That is really quite a magical thing. You can push and pull certain shapes, and what I've been trying is to wipe off. I have a piece of cloth that I'm only going to use for this project. I wipe my brush off so it's almost completely clean, and then you can just push and pull the paint that is already on your substrate. Right, so if you're having trouble with layering on too much paint or paint mixing too much, try that thing with a clean brush. Yeah, it's not easy to do the smaller details. I've watched a couple of videos on YouTube on oil painting demos, and it's a shame that a lot of them are so incredibly fast forwarded that you can't see those subtle brush movements. But the one thing that I did notice is that it's probably, if if we do any future projects with this, and maybe it's something to explore where we don't layer all the paint on the mid-tone, the mid-gray at once. And this is an acrylic type of working that has become very familiar for me, where I lay down a mid-tone and then I paint over with dark and light, right? And that works with a paint that dries on your canvas. So in this project, it's not working too well for me because all this paint is still wet. I understand that there are ways to work with oil paints where you put on a layer and then you let it dry for a couple of days and then you continue. I'm way too impatient for that. Okay, so I'm gonna leave part of this to dry for one day. I'm gonna edit that in the video when that happens, when I'm gonna do that. Because I want to see what the drying time for these water-soluble oil paints is. I'm going to see how it feels the next day. But yeah, basically we're working what is called wet in wet. I didn't know that was a thing. They have a very fancy term for it called alla prima, which is way too fancy for the fact that I'm just too impatient to let stuff dry. I know a couple of artists on Instagram who have like 5 or 6 works going on, all in different stages of drying and layers. I'm like, okay. I really admire that. If you can handle your stuff like that. I'm gonna try and shape that other eye, because it always feels so weird if the one eye is looking at you and the other eye is not. And I'm using, I know I put in the reference photo in the video, but I kind of used the reference photo for the sketching. So I'm not actually looking at it, because I don't really want to bother myself with whether it looks like the reference photo. So I put it in for literal reference in the video for you if you want it. But I'm not actually using it. I do, in my sketch, I try to do some of her basic features, like the one eyelid being a little bit lower than the other, because I like that. I like that asymmetry in the face. Yeah, I'm not going to worry too much about it. I just want the general measurements to be correct, right? So that the distance between the two eyes is the width of one eye, stuff like that. And try and shape that out a little bit. All right, so I'm gonna edit this video to end here in part 1, so it doesn't last too long. I'm gonna try and post part 2 together with this one as I work on this. Right, I'm probably gonna post the other parts later. But I have no idea how long this is gonna take, honestly. I actually expected this to be a little bit quicker, but I think I overestimated myself a little bit. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take my time, and we'll see how long this project takes. All right. So I'm gonna wrap up this video for now. And if you painted along with me, you want to post in the art group, please feel free. I would love to see your work or hear your ideas about oil paints. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you for joining me. Bye bye.